It's heartbreaking that these kids, they're infants, and their future is being robbed. Today's young people and adolescents, they have so much to contribute right now.
If there is a flood, people will lose their livelihoods. That would put pressure on the family, result into child marriages. If they're unable to go to school, there would be learning losses, and then ultimately not being able to find decent work once they grow up.
The community had taken a collective decision to postpone the marriages of all those girls and make sure that they all completed their education. I'm going to zip up this backpack and we're going to preserve this. Dear child of 2044, I hope the adults of 2026 were courageous enough to prioritize the development of girls and boys from their very earliest moments of life through childhood, so every child has the possibility to fulfill their potential.
Doing all this great work already around the world, do you think that things, or your perspective about things, changed a bit more after you became a mother?
100%. Life changes dramatically once parenthood hits, and you have the great privilege of being a parent. And certainly that was the case for me with my son 8 years ago. I think there's a whole range of perspectives that's introduced when you become a parent yourself, and you have to think through, and you're responsible for another life, and becoming much more conscious of what a valuable opportunity it is to give a child the best start in life. Whether that was factoring in my own nutrition while I was pregnant, my own health, let alone what I was, nourishing him with from the very first start. So this month is actually breastfeeding week, but we actually celebrate it for the whole month because it's so important that children are breastfed exclusively from the very first hour of birth for the first 6 months. And ideally, we advocate for up to 2 years. So becoming conscious of that and practicing it directly, and also having the challenge of how do I balance, I'm a working parent with giving my child that best start. So, I'm somebody who likes to walk the talk and be able to practice what I preach. So that has put me to the test, and I have my colleagues to guide me as well. Of course, we have a lot of experts across UNICEF, both formal experts, but also other parents who manage this.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think you experience all of those emotions up closely. Although, like when you're in the field, you would see all those, hardships people go through.
Struggle
sometimes, like
parents.
Even when we are privileged in some sense, the challenge remains the same, and the responsibility remains the same.
And having served in many different contexts, I'm really conscious about the relative privilege that I have. And if I'm struggling with parenting in my position, then I can only imagine families who are living below the poverty line, who may very well be affected directly by climate change. Perhaps they've been displaced, perhaps they're migrants, all of these other factors that complicate and make for very challenging circumstances that they have to overcome. And yet, so many mothers in particular, also fathers, they are incredibly committed to giving their children that best start. Yeah. And I feel it's our duty to further equip and enable and ensure that the systems are there to support families, children in particular, adolescents throughout childhood, so that children do have that opportunity to fulfill their potential.
And in your case, I was just going through some of your background, and I learned that you studied commerce and then you studied law, but you did not go into conventional practice. I mean, since I have done the same.
You have? Oh, interesting.
So I wanted to know that the legal training that you've had, how do you think that it has helped you, particularly when you're doing this humanitarian work and you're in the field?
So both my commerce and legal degrees have, plus my further Masters of Law, they've all contributed to building up a skill set and a way of analyzing situations and problem solving. I really view myself as a problem solver. And when we're talking about pretty immense, serious challenges like over 40% of children being malnourished or stunted in the country, or over 26 million children out of school, you have to have a wide lens and yet also drill down into specificity as to what are the contributing factors, but most importantly, what's the path forward? And I think in that regard, my legal skills have been very, very useful. They've also served me well in negotiations at times in some tricky contexts. And we work as a based on a rights mandate. I mean, the Convention on the Rights of the Child is the foundation of UNICEF's work, and every child is entitled to these rights. So being able to not only understand, but connect rights to everyday people in a way that is not kind of legalistic, but is more compelling, is I think something that I really enjoy doing. But I went to law school knowing I wanted to do international human rights law. So It was never in my horizon to pursue anything else. It was just a matter of how would I manifest that.
And I think you may feel really privileged for getting a chance to ultimately, witness all of these things in person and get to contribute to do something about them.
It's a great privilege. I feel very, very blessed.
And when you're in the field, you get to interact with the kids. Tell us about any interaction you've had with the children or kids in the field recently, and what did they tell you?
Interacting with kids wherever I go is the highlight of my job. I love it, and I take great inspiration from that. So about a month ago in early July, I was most recently in West Karachi, which is a pretty impoverished district. And it's also one of the areas where that are still prone to polio. And so we have a lot of focus there in terms of bringing together our polio eradication efforts that we do with government and our World Health Organization sister entity, but also routine immunization. And it's very linked also to water and sanitation. So one of the incredible things that I got to see, and I had seen the development in the works several months earlier, but this time in early July, it was actually ready. It's an ATM for water, and it halved the cost of water dispensing for the community, and it gives them the flexibility through kind of a very simple card that they can load up with however much they can afford in these bundles of clean, purified water that are co-located with the basic health unit. So it's which is also makes it more convenient. And what I had learned prior to that is the community only had access to clean water if they could organize themselves sufficiently in order to basically order one of these gigantic tankers of water that are, thousands of gallons and liters. And now they can actually just go and get 15 liters or 30 liters themselves, and it's open during the convenient times, the community, there's actually a committee that manages it. And so when, of course, there's a whole group of kids who are so excited to show us how this actually works. And then mothers and the community operator. It was like a life-changing, simple but life-changing intervention. And it costs less than $20,000 to put something like that in a community. So, it's one example of how, bringing the basic right to clean water and making sure that communities have access to that, which naturally also reduces the incidence of disease, waterborne diarrhea, which is such a factor, in terms of child malnutrition, the depletion of nutrients, particularly for very young children. So that was, the energy from the kids, and of course they liked the fact that how it's set up and how they could demonstrate it as well. And just within the same area, this basic health clinic, where for convenience, it's a gathering point. So, this happens to be one of the early locations that we've identified with the Sindh government to be a child-friendly community. And our vision is that eventually, hopefully, in the not too distant future, all communities across Pakistan can be child-friendly, where families, parents, caregivers are equipped to know kind of how they can give their children the best start in life, and that they have access to these services that they're entitled to.
Just a simple thing like clean drinking water can change the trajectory of the future of a lot of these people as well, because of all these associated things that you mentioned about, like malnutrition, because like that contributes to brain development or all of that.
Exactly. And we have to say there's a drought taking place right now. So access to water it's a scarce resource. So how that is managed and how people have access to it for life is really a critical conversation at the moment.
I've had conversations with anthropologists, historians, education experts, and what I've learned is that the future that they are going to inherit is not going to be the same as, the present and like the recent past as well. For a child born today will be 18 years of age by 2044. And that may look like a different world altogether. The societies may shape a bit differently. But what do you think, what are some of those challenges that these children will face that their parents have not?
You're so right that the future it's going to be very, very different for the children who are being born today. We're already seeing it with young people today compared to what you and I had to go through and our upbringings. One of those critical differences is going to be made in terms of what kids are learning, the foundational learning that they have. And I'm not just talking about literacy and numeracy, that those are basics, but it's also the digital skills, the critical thinking, the ability to innovate, the ability to communicate and to be flexible in terms of the types of opportunities that they both pursue and generate themselves. And that combination of foundational literacy and these other skills and approaches and mindsets is going to really shape how young people are successful in the future. And, at the moment, the children here in Pakistan are not being sufficiently set up for that kind of success. The good thing is it is something that is being actively worked on in terms of the national curriculum, for example, in terms of how provinces are looking at managing the education system. We as UNICEF would say that this really needs to be a priority for investment and accelerated, not only in terms of the nature and the quality of the learning, including the quality of the teachers and their training and capacities, but ensuring that all children have this. There are over 25 million, 26 million children who are left out of the education system entirely right now. So
which is like more than the population of Australia.
Exactly. So what is the future for that, for those children in terms of contributing economically to not only their own kind of families, but to the wider community? They need to be brought in. And that's why the other aspect that I would emphasize in this is the connectivity between that foundational learning and skills to actual jobs and entrepreneurial opportunities. That can be solved through public-private kinds of partnerships. But the private sector has a huge role to play in this because they can help shape and determine and prepare young people into different types of industries and roles. They can give mentorship opportunities, apprenticeships, internships. And this is what one of the recently, together with the Prime Minister's Youth Program, we launched Purazam Pakistan, which is exactly that, connecting education, or let's say learning, with skills development and employment and entrepreneurship as a continuum of learning to earning, because it's insufficient that we stop at learning. It's got to connect up with an ability to learn.
Especially like the way nature of work is also changing.
Nature of work, green skills, the green economy, all of these areas need to be factored in, AI into how kids are learning from the outset these days. So having wider connectivity around the country as well, from the internet perspective, access to digital technology, looking at how kids are accessing learning content and, beyond traditional classroom kinds of approaches. It's not a problem that can be solved by building more schools. This is not an infrastructure issue. It's rather an approach of the content of the learning and how it's delivered, and making sure that young people and children from the outset, including from early childhood, not grade 1 only, but there's a pivotal role in success that early childhood development yields, that those platforms and kind of approaches are made available at a wide scale across Pakistan, including more remote locations.
I'll actually take you back to the climate change point again, because that is also closely probably connected to the challenges that you mentioned, the kids are going to face. And what do you think, when a disaster strikes, what kind of challenges generally communities face? And for a child, how do they experience all of this, and what long-term repercussions are there for them?
So climate change is hugely disruptive for everyone, but children experience it in a particular way, and it's usually a complete upheaval of their stability. Possibly they're displaced because their homes have been inundated. I visited in December schools in southern Punjab that had been, the water line was at over 5 feet high. It was, and the school is no longer structurally sound. So the kids are gathering across from the school in still a temporary kind of learning space. So everything that is known and stable is usually disrupted for children, which has hugely destabilizing kind of impact in terms of mental well-being and their stress. In addition to, of course, there's a physical impact, because oftentimes the access to clean water and sanitation has been disrupted. So exposure to disease, there's fecal matter around them that is carrying, that poses risks and hazards. And they may fall ill, especially if they haven't been kept up on their routine immunization, which is still, unfortunately, the case in a number of places. So it's a life-changing event, and building resilience within children as well as the wider family and community is so essential. And what do I mean by that? It's not just kind of the preparedness that goes into disaster risk reduction, though that has an important role, but it's also actively working to enable people to be able to weather such kind of recurrent or disastrous incidents and be able to cope and move forward in a positive way despite extreme hardship. And that's quite a tall order for when you're 5 years old or however old you are. And at this stage, there are a lot of children across Pakistan who are experiencing that kind of events. But I'd like to say it's not only about the major disasters. Just right now, it's really hot in many parts of Pakistan. I mean, there's a heat wave, there's drought, and yet it's the time when kids are starting to go back to school. Many of those classrooms are unbearably hot. So that too is disruptive to learning. And requires a resilience. Okay, so we can't learn inside the classroom right now. Are there other locations, or do we sit outside for the time being? So being able to be adaptable and looking at alternatives, and that's obviously important for the people who are in charge of the teachers, the principals. But I guess I want to make the point that it's not only about the disasters that hit the headlines, but every day there are challenges that kids are facing. Maybe the livelihoods have been disrupted for the parents, and they, depending on where they earn their livelihood, and they have to move. So all of a sudden the children are uprooted into a new area and have to start over. And our aim is that wherever the child is, they should have access to the same systems and support and services, the basic services, whether that's health or education or the social protection, if they're eligible, and that provides that kind of stability.
So generally, like, we take disasters as a standalone event, but there can be a chain reaction that affects their lives. So I was thinking that probably, for example, if there is a flood, so the flood would result in, lack of having clean drinking water. A lot of people, like you mentioned, will lose their livelihoods as well. That would put pressure on the family. They would want to try to get rid of some of the girls in their family. So that would result into child marriages as well. Probably, like, it also increases the domestic violence as a result. Then kids, like you mentioned, due to heat waves or floods, If they're unable to go to school, there would be learning losses as well. I think like in flood hit areas, schools may not be operating anyway, but those learning losses would then lead into them not gaining enough knowledge and not probably completing their education, and then ultimately not being able to find decent work once they grow up. So I think like there is a whole chain reaction to one particular event that can.
And parents are also less likely to continue their children in education during such kind of, as they're coping with such kind of disasters as well. So, or maybe they continue with some of their children and pull out others, oftentimes girls. So those are very real effects. And to address that, it means that the education curriculum needs to be able to be delivered in different ways that allows children to still access it flexibly. Some of those ways include kind of catch-up programs or accelerated learning programs, which I've visited several of those classrooms, and I mean, they are just packed with eager kids who are begging for them to continue beyond grade 8, where oftentimes, you'll see students from grade 6, 7, 8 in one cohort, all crammed together, just, absorbing as much as they can, because the value that they place on that opportunity is extremely high. But it also means having education materials that are digital and records that can be easily, can move with people as they're displaced from one area to another, or that can still be accessible, even if all of the paper has been kind of flooded and ruined. These are all some of the practical kind of considerations that need to come in terms of how the system is managed, and that young people, again, that the priority is placed in valuing education for the future of the nation. Its prosperity is really, will be significantly correlated to how well prepared young people are, or children are, from the early days.
And when we talk about disaster preparedness, a lot of times you also want to create awareness among the youngsters, so that they are either better prepared for the future that they are going to inherit. WHO terms mental health as a crisis as well. And when we are giving out all these messages about climate change, about preparing people for the disaster, in some sense, we also inculcate that eco-anxiety in them. If there is no call to action, if they don't feel that there isn't any agency for them to do anything about it. And so what do you think for all these youngsters who may feel that, who may understand the need for better preparedness, but at the same time, what channels are available for them to, or what methods can be there for them to channelize their energy and get to feel that they are contributing towards this issue that we all are facing?
I think today's young people and adolescents, they have so much to contribute right now. They are not just leaders for tomorrow. They are leaders and very capable today. So I'm, together with my colleagues, we are big believers that they need to be given the opportunity and the knowledge and skills and the platforms in order to be able to kind of really realize their agency and be empowered. So one of the ways that this is being practically enabled is through, in fact, I was at the launch earlier today of Tayar, Pakistan. It's a training for adolescents and youth in resilience reduction, disaster and resilience reduction. And its aim is ultimately we're starting with 28,000 young people being trained. But the Prime Minister has the ambition that 2 million as a minimum young people ought to be trained. And I think that's...
And what exactly that training would be about?
It's about... Here, I have the curriculum right in front of me. Okay. And it has everything a young person ought to know as a basis for increasing resilience, but also not just within themselves, but in their communities. And it's all types of different climate kind of disasters and impacts. So it's very practical. We think it's much more compelling if a teenager is discussing this with their peers than if it's, through an adult per se. So we're very much targeting young people directly so they can be empowered in order to have those kinds of cascading conversations with peers. Similarly, there's a network of over 300 universities across Pakistan who are included in this, so that students, active university students, can discuss with their peers. They bring that home, of course, to their families, to their wider community, and can have that kind of influence. I believe, I was told there were about 3 million active university students right now across Pakistan. That's an amazing resource, and they are already in an institution who are, where they're learning and engaged. So channeling these kind of core skills and awareness through them. And then it's also partnering with organizations like the Girl Guides of Pakistan and the Boy Scouts of Pakistan. They are important partners as well because they're already highly motivated and committed to service. And they're well organized amongst themselves, and it's nationwide. So it's an amazing kind of platform. And so I know, for instance, the Girl Guides, they recently added a badge to, like, the Girl Guides can earn through taking a certain kind of disaster risk reduction training. And, that enables them to further kind of...
Can you think of any particular example that you came across and you were really impressed by?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the places that we have also identified as, and where we're actively working in for a child-friendly community, is called Suchawal. It's in Sindh. And there, one of the components has been working with the young people of that community, which is flood-prone. And I just was so struck and inspired by these young teenage girls who they were leading the community, and the community elders had empowered them as well and were beaming with pride because of these girls. The girls had mapped out the whole. They had analyzed how the community had been previously affected by the floods last year, and looked at how they could mitigate that in the future, and persuaded the elders and adults of making certain changes in terms of to avert unnecessary damage and disaster in the future. So, and they were really speaking with confidence, conviction, knowledge. It was just amazing. So I took a lot of inspiration from that, and just this is exactly the kind of young energy that is needed.
Generally, people, you would expect that in a remote area, like you mentioned, people may not be too welcoming, letting girls take an initiative like that. It must be really empowering for them.
It was so empowering. And not only that, the community had taken a collective decision to postpone the marriages of all those girls and make sure that they all completed their education. So this is what we're talking about, a child-friendly community where children have agency, adults, have a role clearly, but they're also giving space to the young people and making, allowing them to fulfill their potential.
Because I feel like a lot of times when we talk about youth engagement, a lot of things just remain tokenistic as well. But this example that you particularly mentioned, I think like they may have felt that they have contributed actually on the ground and did something about, to address this problem. It's fascinating.
I really encourage, we have a short clip about one of these girls who takes the viewer through her community, her village. Watch it. It's so uplifting. I showed it to my son as well. Young people have so much to give and to do across Pakistan. And I think the challenges that the nation are facing will only be surmounted if young people are actively engaged.
Yeah, it's like we are talking about millions and millions of children. Mm-hmm. That's like a huge manpower also that needs a direction and agency to get to do something about it.
In 5 years, there's going to be 20 more million people added to the population. How are those 20 more million going to be enabled to be given the best start in life and the best trajectory to fulfill their potential?
So these initiatives like that you just mentioned about Girl Scout, how can we scale them up at a national level? Because I'm sure like having these initiatives in one or two districts where it is a success, but I think like a lot of times pilot phases, they turn out to be quite successful, but when we scale them up, things fall apart. So in your opinion, what do we need to do to make sure that we are able to scale these initiatives?
Scale is exactly the aim. And that is the daily challenge that UNICEF, that my team and I have taken up. And on top of scale, it's acceleration. Those are the two kind of dimensions that need to be worked on simultaneously, I would say. Scale, firstly, I do not speak about pilot projects. It's a start, and and we need to be rapidly learning as we iterate. But it's not kind of resigned to a particular cohort of communities, let's say. On the youth engagement, firstly, one of the great initiatives that the Prime Minister has started is this digital youth hub that is available for all young people across the country to not only sign up to, but to access resources on and to be linked up with pertinent information for them, job opportunities, mentorship, apprenticeship opportunities. And the Pur Azam Pakistan is linking private sector into that so that there's a deliberate connection between young people and private sector. There's almost 1 million young people on there already, but this country has millions. So there's a natural means of increasing access to information and connecting those dots within platforms and centralizing the information. That's one. At a community level, I believe that the change will come through the communities themselves deciding and having some empowerment to that they want a better future for their children and their community and their families and communities. And in a way, as rights holders, that they are demanding that the services reach them.
Yeah.
But they're not waiting for their services either. They are also taking certain
self-initiatives to
exactly. And young people have a huge role to play in that. So the engagement with communities as to even small things that they can do that have huge impact with hardly any cost is so important. One of them, I started off by saying that this is breastfeeding, World Breastfeeding Week. We call it month. The cost savings by breastfeeding your child exclusively for 6 months, people don't realize how impactful that is. That sets up your child with their first immunization, the bonding between the mother and the child, and a lifetime of health
long-term
benefits.
health benefits.
Absolutely.
The kids, yeah.
And it's zero cost compared to formula milk, for instance, which is not a milk. Yeah. It's a formula. So even just the knowledge around the benefits and cutting through myths that perpetuate, whether in families or communities, a small change like that can have a huge impact in terms of reducing nutritional deficiencies and things like that, and stunting, for instance.
And I hope like with this initiative, there would be like more awareness for the mothers to also understand how to fill their iron deficiency so that they don't end up
anemia.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there must be like a lot of
all of those basics, the basics of nutrition for the mother, nutrition for the child. What is a healthy complementary diet for children once they reach age 6 months, and they shouldn't have anything else than breast milk for the first 6 months, not a drop of water, because water risks
if it
also
is contaminated, especially.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that would result into stunting otherwise, if it's not clean drinking water.
Yeah, precisely. So knowledge like this, but then birth registration, the power of having an identity for your child and ensuring that is free and it's available right from the first day, and how important that is for registering your child in order to ensure their access to future systems and services, and that they are counted. So that's another aspect of a child-friendly community. Having those routine immunizations on time and the right combination of immunizations, including polio, that vaccine, in order for, again, the child to have the protected from any of these diseases and to reduce their exposure. The clean water. How do you clean your water when you don't have access to clean water? So there are ways that can be done, but it needs to be known and disseminated and prioritized in terms of these kind of basics of we believe can have a transformative impact already at very low cost for communities, for families, if they're aware of it and they actively practice it. Hand washing. How powerful is that in terms of, we saw in COVID, a huge strides were made in terms of awareness about the importance of hand washing. I'm not sure that's been sufficiently ingrained as much as it could have or could going forward in order to further reduce contaminants that come into contact, particularly with children again. There's a huge parts of this country that do not have access to safe water or sanitation facilities.
And so like it's also interesting that these are all those small things, but the chain reaction that they have,
the combined impact.
So it just changes the life's trajectory for a lot of children.
So we look at children as their whole beings. I mean, of course, it makes sense.
Yeah.
So it is not impactful to have interventions in a kind of isolated, disconnected way. Rather, they have to have a multiplier effect.
Yeah.
The child needs to experience the combination of these interventions and good practices, basically. And we're looking at how to make those accessible and easy, readily usable, applicable for any caregiver. Of course, we're working and supporting actively every single provincial government and the federal government in order to implement the policies and strengthen the systems that need to be in place for people to access. Our observation, though, there is not really a major gaps in policy, but there are significant gaps in implementation and in monitoring the implementation, the enforcement.
To make sure that, there is a sustainability and whatever initiative that has been planned and executed, it goes on for a long time without being compromised over quality. When we have these Girl Scout, all the volunteers, they would also want some livelihood out of whatever they're doing, right? Because it is also important not just to engage them to get our end goals or objectives met, but also for their individual lives also to let them find livelihood, to let them have that economic independence as well. So it's good to know that these initiatives that you mentioned about, it's also taking care of that particular aspect.
It's draining, but it's also towards, it has the possibility to go towards livelihood as well. I think what I also appreciate about the Girl Guides and Boy Scouts is that they operate at scale. They're in so many communities, and I think that's an incredible resource and they're already bound by a certain set of values that align also with service and being contributing, doing good for your communities.
That's fascinating. And I hope if we are able to scale these things up, it solves a lot of problems around, giving that voice to our women as well. Because in the long run, if these girls are getting to learn these skills and they're articulated, they're able to express their thoughts, it goes a long way.
It's so inspiring. And having more female role models is very important as well. And so one of those turning points, I think, or keys, let's say, is education. It doesn't necessarily have to be only the formal education, but giving girls the foundation for learning is really important, and then giving them space to actually apply that education. I've visited one of our accelerated learning programs that we support in Punjab a few months ago as well. And I met with a group of 3 mothers. None of them were educated, and they all of them had their girls and their daughters in this catch-up program. And they had really prioritized that decision and wanted to make sure that the girls were benefiting from it. And these are extremely poor families. These young girls and boys need to work as well. So it's part of the day is their work and part of the day is learning. And I was so struck firstly by the mothers who, for them, they see this as a life-changing opportunity that they're enabling and that they wish they had themselves.
That's the thing, they wouldn't want their children to have the life that they have lived.
Exactly. And so then I met actually the girls, some of them who were part of that program.
Yeah, can we see that video that you mentioned about?
Yeah, sure. I love seeing it.
You mentioned that you also showed it to your son.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yes.
How was his reaction?
He was certainly very curious, and I have taken him with me to another community that was flood affected, and so he has some perspective on vulnerability, and it was extremely eye-opening for him.
That is so amazing. I mean, I think you've done the right thing of exposing him to these realities early on in life.
I'm trying to raise a world citizen, someone who's going to contribute for good in the future.
Okay, we can watch this, and we can also like show it on screen separately.
हेलो अस्सलाम वालेकुम मुझे नाला सोबा है मैं जीमा थोड़ा सारा अही मुझे गोठ है अच्छा तमा के मुझे गोठ देखाया ये मुझे पालतू जानवर है इनके नालो मेनाज है ये मुझे पसंदीदा जानवर है
तो वन टिकटॉकर हलता पानी वानी भर घर में पानी को नहीं वन घर जो पानी भरे
हेलो तो क्लास में रहो असन स्कूल के बाद क्लाइमेट चेंज के बारे में पढ़न था उन जा मसला है उनके मोडियर सकूं था जॾहिं बरसाति इलाही थिए थी ॿोॾियूं थी अचनि पोइ स्कूल नथा पुॼी सघूं पाणी में हफ़्तनि जा हफ़्ता था गुज़ारूं कुझु ॿार चवंदा त असां मच्छियुनि वांगुरु आहियूं इहे असांजो पूरो ॻोठ आहे ऐं यादि रखो त क्लाइमेट चेंज असली हूंदो आहे ऐं असां सभु गॾिजी पंहिंजे अर्थ खे महफ़ूज़ रखी सघूं था ख़ुदा हाफ़िज़
She is so cool.
Isn't she? I mean, I was blown away. And she's not alone.
Yeah.
There was a group of them. And, you know, there's girls like her all across Pakistan.
Yeah.
So you see the agency, the energy, the ability to contribute and to affect change. It's amazing.
That's what I'm thinking. Like, again, all of this learning and exposure, ultimately, when they grow up, it is going to help them a lot. Whenever they get into those roles of being a mother, being out there, doing any work. So this exposure would really be helpful to them.
I mean, there is solid evidence that the more education a young woman has, firstly, she postpones, having children herself. But secondly, she makes better decisions for her children in terms of their nutrition, in terms of also their education, their health. So it's got a really, just that has an important multiplier effect as well.
I had a conversation with Dr. Aisha Khan last month over podcast, and I asked her what is her personal definition of empowerment, and what she said was fascinating. She said for her, empowerment is simply a woman's ability to choose, right? And she also mentioned that generally women want one less child than the man wants, right? So yes, I think ultimately it's the ability to choose that we would aspire to have.
Ideally, yes, and to make an informed choice as well, to know what the options are.
Yeah, and then whatever decision you end up taking, you would know that you've considered your options. And
exactly.
Okay, thank you. This was really interesting and refreshing.
Isn't it?
Yeah, loved it.
So we get to meet girls like her all the time. Please do. Please do. We get to interact and meet girls like her all the time. And it's so satisfying being able to, with very, yes, there's some investment, but it doesn't take a lot to just enable a young person like that.
And all you need to do is to just provide them some guidance, right? And some platform where they're able to do something.
It's opportunity. It's so much about opportunity. And we believe that every child should have the opportunity to fulfill their potential, no matter where they live or what kind of family they've been born into.
I'll move towards the other challenge probably that kids will be facing, and something that is going to increase inequality. And for me, that is the rise of AI and automation. Back in 2018, I came across two interesting pieces. One was the realization that the current education system is like 200 years old. It started after the Industrial Revolution, right? And the second was McKinsey Global Institute's projection that by 2030, 800 million people would lose their job. Like not exactly lose, but 800 million jobs would be displaced by 2030. And so this was like almost 10 years now. So what I did as a response, because I was also part of some of the education programs, education reforms program in Punjab. And in my own capacity, I started an institute. And it was a social business. We had kids to come and learn coding and programming, because I have, the conversations I had with the education experts, they told me, coding and programming was the future for kids. And so we started with this, teaching kids coding and programming and soft skills and all of that. And we had two shifts, kids who could afford to pay and kids who could not afford to pay. They were also like part of it. What I learned from there was that kids who could not afford to pay, probably they needed such trainings more than the kids who could afford to pay, because the schools would do something about what was needed to make them successful by 2030. But kids who could not afford to pay, that also included a cohort of children who were out of school. Then there are children, who were in school, but they're not having that quality education. And then we have the third cohort, which is privileged in some sense, right? So that, again, I think like what worries me also is that the inequality is going to increase over time if we do not address these problems in a more planned way. So I have a scenario for you, and then I'll ask you the question, right? So these are two fictional girls, 12 years of age. One is Zuha, and she attends a well-resourced urban school. She has reliable internet access. She uses a personal digital device, and she already uses AI for her schoolwork. So here's Zuha. And then we have Amna, who lives in, and these are like fictional characters, right? Lives in a climate vulnerable district. She has experienced interruptions in schooling for whatever reasons. She needs a stronger foundational learning support, and she has limited internet access. So the question is that what should Pakistan do for each one of them over the next 5 years to prepare them for a better future?
Great scenario. Thank you. Well, one of the first things Pakistan needs to do, in my opinion, is make sure that both Zuha and Amna stay in school and have the possibility to continue their studies. Ideally, Amna's access to schooling is, including the curriculum and the quality of teaching, is on par with what Zuha has the privilege to be accessing, even if one is in a public system and the other is through maybe an outsourced school or private system. We believe that the curriculum ought to be comparable from a foundational perspective. Clearly, Amna is a bit disadvantaged in terms of her access to technology. And so the risks related to an increasing digital divide are very apparent. And I think that's not only for Pakistan, but for many countries, something that governments are grappling with as they try and keep up with technology in relation to the preparation of their human capital, their children, and the future of the nation. So making sure that there are other ways that Amna can still build digital skills with less kind of direct access at home through personal devices and so forth, but at least in the school environment or at the community environment, within the community, there should be some attention and access to connectivity and to kind of specific programs that allow children and young people, teach them foundational digital literacy and skills. What could that look like? I know that Pakistan has invested quite heavily, and so has the private market, in terms of connectivity, even in rural areas, but making sure that every community has stable internet access. And maybe that is actually maybe the locus within a village or a community is actually the school, perhaps, where digital content and learning related to digitization and related skills like coding are prioritized and invested in from a at least from specific ages. Probably at age 12, they'd be absorbing that content extremely quickly. It'd be wonderful if they were introduced even earlier. So, not waiting until age 12, but even, from grade 1, for instance, having some exposure to this. But we believe it's never too late. So Amna certainly would have if she was given the opportunity, would have the ability to catch up. But there's a real risk here.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's, it's important to realize how easily they could take very different trajectories in terms of their future. And that's why the starting point is keeping them both in school, regardless, because regardless, just that simple act is going to have a positive effect in terms of how Amna the opportunities she will be able to have access to when she finishes her studies, and hopefully also being able to generate opportunities herself and not, being kind of channeled into a marriage immediately or early marriage, let's say. I should say early marriage or child marriage.
But the danger is real in a way that, the inequality can increase if we purposefully don't act now.
And poverty is increasing in Pakistan. I think, it's not that long ago that the latest findings came out that there's a 7% increase in people who are living below the poverty line in Pakistan. And when you combine that with the population growth, that risks having more children left behind from those who are in more privileged, family situations. So being cognizant of that and, in fact, deliberately targeting those who are at risk through a combination of social programs like the Benazir Income Support Program that we have the privilege to be a partner for, but also through the education system. And provinces are making difficult choices right now. More and more have decided to outsource education to
private entities
and to privatize it, which one can understand the rationale for that. But in doing so, it's really important that there's still attention to the quality of the curriculum and to how that is regulated, monitored, and the access that young people or children have to the program, regardless of whether it's a privatized school or not. So that it may actually be an improvement, and given limited resources, that there's reason to be optimistic, but it will only be so good if children are not being left behind. And right now, there's far too many children who are excluded or completely left behind. And, for a nation who is a nuclear power to have the second highest number of children out of school it's incongruous. And also one of the highest rates of stunting, which clearly has an impact on cognitive development as well as growth. It means that the future of the country in terms of its human capital is being jeopardized.
On stunting, it just reminds me, I was listening to, or maybe reading book of Dr. Jordan Peterson, and he mentioned that, one of the development areas that he would have liked to be prioritized is stunting, because there's a huge population that is suffering from that. And what he said was that if we are able to, let these children live to their full potential, they would figure out what to do with climate change and what to do with education and economic empowerment, everything. But we need to give them that opportunity to have that, to live to their full cognitive potential.
I totally agree with that. Stunting is addressing that rapidly and at scale, has to be a priority for the nation. And every parent ought to know how they can prevent stunting and ensure that their child has optimal nutrition while they grow, from the time that the mother is pregnant all the way through. And alongside addressing stunting, learning. Those are game changers.
Yeah, because they would go hand in hand for them to become more useful citizens in the future and to live a successful life for themselves.
Be productive and contributing to society in a positive and productive way, and fulfilling their potential. I mean, it's heartbreaking that these kids who they're infants and their future is being robbed because they don't have the right nutritional balance in a country that's not short of food in general. Sure, there are some scarcity issues, but it's more about knowledge and the combination of what food groups children need to thrive.
These children, even when they grow up, they wouldn't know where they lacked, because if you're stunted as a child, you wouldn't be able to tell. So as when you grow up, what you were missing in your childhood.
Yeah, it's really heartbreaking, and I believe it's something that we collectively ought to be able to do something about rapidly. This is not an area for progressive incremental change. This requires radical, transformative, quantum leaps of change now.
I mean, imagine we talk about 25 million children out of school right now. With the earlier discussion on the AI and all that, we might be also counting number of children who are actually in school but are not getting quality education. And then this whole problem coupled with stunting, we are preparing a whole generation for a disastrous future otherwise.
And yet, Pakistan has every ingredient to be successful and to prosper in the future if it harnesses its talent and capability, and which is largely resides in its youthful population. Whether that's the opportunities that they have within Pakistan and contributing, or that, through the export of labor, which there's a high demand for many fields, health professionals, amongst others. So the potential is there, but how is the country preparing itself? If you look at also the budget allocation most recently at the federal level and then at the provincial levels, primary education and healthcare have not been increased.
I think I was reading somewhere there is a decrease of 0.8%, something like that.
No doubt there's very difficult decisions that need to be made when it comes to budget and reduced reduce fiscal space, but that prioritization has real consequences. And yeah, there's a difficult situation when half the resources are going to debt financing as well.
Yeah.
But having a long-term perspective on the value of investing in human capital and how that trajectory can be changed. There are amazing examples from within the region of countries that have made that kind of transformative change.
And sometimes, although we really brag about the youth bulge we have, but I think if we don't pay attention to this large percentage of youth that requires that attention to be more productive, it doesn't really then reflect the true potential that we have.
Based on evidence, there's a 40-year growth trajectory for the population. That's 40 potential years of dividend, if that dividend is harnessed and it can be further grown. But if at the moment what we see through poor health, poor nutritional status, which then leads to and inadequate immunization, those lead to health kind of setbacks, as well as cognitive and developmental setbacks, which then in turn impact potential through the learning system. And there are inadequate pathways of channeling learning into earning through whichever form one may need. And you look at in the future, as you started off by saying, there'll be fewer jobs. So we need more resourceful people who are capable of almost creating like a portfolio of sources of income that they can generate. That being deliberate of how you prepare a population for that kind of reality requires some really deliberate and focused kind of strategizing and implementation.
And prioritization as well.
And prioritization, yes. So we're here to be the thought partner, the knowledge kind of partner to government in those conversations, and to provide evidence and, in a way, solutions, like a systems architect as to what different choices lead to. It's not all about resources, though that is a factor. It's also it's also about just, in a way, prioritizing what your vision is and what the pathway you want to choose to realize that vision. The private sector can do a lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
But of course, like if they see some return as well, they would happily do, which is why probably it is the responsibility of the government to take care of their interest as well.
But you know what? I have been meeting regularly with CEOs, and there is an incredible appetite. Many of them are already doing CSR work of their own, not only because the government says they have to do a certain percentage, but because they believe in it. And and we have the privilege to partner with some of those companies as well, and they're doing amazing work. And when they hear about approaches like child-friendly communities and having that go across Pakistan at scale, how amazing would it be if a community demonstrates that within a 2-year time frame they have significantly met these, let's say, top 10 priorities for children's well-being. Their births are registered at birth. they have their immunization, they're in early childhood development, all these kind of milestones, that then that community is somehow recognized and sponsored by a private sector company with something of value and needed by the community. Maybe it's clean water, maybe it's electrification, or there could be different. That would be an amazing kind of alliance and partnership that could reward and also accelerate agency by communities.
But what implementers need to do to make sure that the private sector is also engaged and whatever contribution they want to make is fully utilized?
I think there needs to be a dialogue, firstly, and a strategy related to this. I'm also aware that private sector entities are often a bit skeptical, perhaps, about partnering with public institutions. So organizations like ours can have a convening and advisory role of how private sector funds can be used most impactfully in such kind of initiatives that are intended to have a public good, but where this is likely not the area of expertise for the public, for the company, but they're willing to contribute, and maybe their factories are nearby, or maybe their workforce is being drawn from a particular district. But having companies step up to sponsor a union council with all of its communities and villages in that union council, that is one of the catalytic types of approaches that can actually go across the country.
We talked about multiple topics so far, and we talked about the need for prioritization as well. I have a segment for you. Let's prepare a backpack for the kids who will be 18 by 2044. And we have multiple things that we talked about that will be really essential for these kids to have by 2044.
So kids are born
today. When they are 18, what should we provide them, right? So it's emotional well-being, the foundational learning. We talked about climate resilience, voice and agency, digital and AI literacy, and employable skills. I mean, all of these are important.
They're all highly relevant, yes.
But if I ask you to prioritize them in a way, because budgets will always be limited, but if you have to put them in the backpack one by one, how would you go about it?
The sequence.
Yes.
So one of these here, this foundational learning is a right.
Okay.
The right to education. Every child innately has this right. So this has to go in the backpack. The form of that foundational learning, how it's delivered, can be, there can be innovative approaches to that delivery. But learning is not optional. It's got to go in the backpack. Yeah. Employable skills also has to go in the backpack. This is not to the exclusion of entrepreneurial skills as well. I believe they're complementary and go hand in hand. But being able to translate learning into something practical that kids can actually then apply and contribute back into the community and earn a livelihood is very valuable. Voice and agency is critical. This has to also go into the backpack because it's the foundation of having confidence and having the space to have a voice and be respected equally, boys and girls, through gender equality, is vital for the future. And it's, having also that ability to speak up in the face of whatever circumstances are being faced, and to contribute ideas and innovation and their talent. So these three so far, for sure. I'm not excluding any.
Yeah. But you can just talk about them generally without putting them.
But I would say this is the initial.
These are the three essential ones. Yes.
Set of three. Now, climate resilience in Pakistan is also vital because Pakistan's on the forefront of being one of the top 3 countries most prone and vulnerable to climate disasters. What I've been struck by here when I've met young people is how resilient they already are. It's actually really remarkable. I don't know how that's inculcated within families, but I think this will only increase in its resilience to all kinds of things, all kinds of changes. Climate is one of those, clearly very, very important. But in general, a trait of resilience and being able to adapt and be flexible in the future, not following necessarily a linear approach.
Because we also don't know what the future holds. So there could be challenges that we cannot foresee right now. But having a resilient mindset would enable us to face any challenge that we
be resourceful encounter. And there are so many potential sources of disruption in the world today, and this neighborhood where Pakistan finds itself is
quite
also
hostile.
Very complicated, and Pakistan has vulnerabilities there. You see the Strait of Hormuz. How many countries are being impacted by, just that
small choke point
for supplies, right? So certainly, digital and AI literacy. We talked about that a little bit earlier. For in this day and age, in terms of the value of digital skills and literacy and knowledge and being able to harness that potential for anything. I think this is a game changer and going to be one of the points of haves and have-nots. So the young people who don't have digital and AI literacy will fall behind, or they will be trapped in a more limited set of roles and opportunities. So whereas even if you didn't have a strong foundation in maybe, let's say, a formal education for 12 years, if you have digital and AI literacy and basic literacy and numeracy, you could probably do a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's going in there. And it is not I'm not discounting emotional well-being because by ending on it, but rather it's the wrapping that makes all of these other.
So it's more like cross-cutting.
It is cross-cutting, and it's also foundational. Because without emotional well-being, you'll never reach the full potential of these other kind of, whether they're skills or opportunities or mindsets. Because a child who has been destabilized, has been subjected to violence or abuse, is going to have a lot of emotional things that they need to process that would perhaps impact their view on the world. and their ability to contribute, potentially. Whereas one that is stable, confident, feels, capable and empowered, will make the most even of a difficult situation.
And I think with the rise of AI and automation, all of that, the ability to cooperate more closely, to work together, all of these basic skills will be really essential, and having your mental well-being in order would enable you to actually do that.
Exactly. I'm going to zip up this backpack and we're going to preserve this for the child who is born today and
turning 18 in 2044.
Exactly. And just picking up on that theme of also the resilience and adaptive, agile mindset and the critical thinking, I think being able to think outside of the box and not being bound to rote learning, which has been a foundation of the education program for a very long time. And that's a pretty radical change that's needed in order to kind of, in a way, unleash the potential that children and young people have to contribute and to generate new ideas. And those original thinkers should be celebrated. I'm a parent, you're a parent, we all have to go sometimes to these parent-teacher meetings.
Yes.
And, for me, it's a source of pride if I'm told that, so that my son is kind of not necessarily following the standard approach that's been set out, but that he's coming up with creative, totally original ideas. I'm thankful that he's attending a school that recognizes that and values it.
Yeah.
This is not the norm yet in many schools in terms of how teachers approach that type of kind of out of the box thinking. They ask for a certain thing to be done, and if it's done in another color or if it's done with another kind of lens, then they're critical of the child, and that's a mistake.
Which is why, as a parent also, it is your responsibility more than ever now in the times that we live in, making them lifelong learners in a way, so that they're not just sticking to whatever is written in the books or whatever is taught in the school, having a mindset that they understand that learning never stops. Not, it just continues even after the school as well, and after even when you go into your professional field.
Learning never stops, and conformity is not the objective. That your individuality, there's space for that, and ought to be recognized, and it should flourish, be allowed to flourish.
And also not just sticking to the system also, because the systems have been there for quite some time, and a lot of them will collapse in a way. So I think once you also realize that when you poke the fabric of reality, on the other side, things change. That also exposes you to the possibilities out there in the world and how you can contribute to, to the reality that we live in.
In the future of education, what form, what is most valuable? Certainly when I was growing up, and I must say I'm the daughter of two professors, university professors. So academia was, an expectation in our household. There was never any doubt that I would go to university, not just one degree, but, more. And that sets one up for success, and it gives you a kind of, in a way, some insurance that you're going to have options later in life. Nowadays, that's not necessarily the case. Yeah. And, I regularly hear young people questioning, why do I need to go to university? What am I going to gain from that? Is it going to get me a job at the end? And so educational institutions also and the government need to reflect on how they are also evolving and adding value and practicality to people's.
And in a way, like you mentioned earlier also, that as an individual, you also have to find your own answers as well. Everyone's circumstances would be different. There can't be one set formula for everyone to succeed. So, within your own rights, you have to see what works for you and then pursue that.
Yeah.
Before we conclude, I have one last thing for you, which is I want you to write a note to Amna.
Okay.
And she's turning 18 in 2044. So here you go.
And is she opening this in 2040?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
And you can just read it out after you write
Okay.
it.
Okay. All right. Make sure I can read when I... All right.
So what you got?
So dear Amna, dear child of 2044, I hope the adults of 2026 were courageous enough to prioritize the development of girls and boys from their very earliest moments of life through childhood. So every child has the possibility to fulfill their potential. So that's very inclusive because it's the combination of priorities. It's not a single intervention. It's the combination of having adequate nutrition. It's the combination of having, routine immunization, love, protection, a legal identity, parents knowing how to play with their child and how that stimulates their brain development. All those ingredients coming together in a very deliberate way that people actually embrace the incredible power that is in their hands, especially parents at those earliest stages, to set up a child for a trajectory of development and growth. The systems need to be there, but the parents and the caregivers have such a foundational role, and that they carry that forward.
So like you mentioned earlier also, that treating children as a whole.
Exactly. It's not a single intervention. It's the whole, that whole child, human being, so she or he can flourish.
Pernille, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. It's been a delightful conversation.
And I hope to see you soon again.
Likewise.